Unsolved mysteries have always intrigued people because they represent the unknown and the unexplained, which can be both fascinating and unsettling. Humans are naturally curious creatures, and we are always looking for answers to the questions that intrigue us. The mysterious creatures living in Antarctica. Antarctica is one of the most inhospitable and remote regions on Earth, making it extremely challenging to study. Antarctica is the coldest and windiest continent on Earth, with temperatures regularly dropping below -50 degrees. Researchers must cope with extreme cold, blizzards, and high winds that can make travel and outdoor activities hazardous. Antarctica is located at the southernmost point of the planet and is only reachable by sea or air. This makes it expensive and logistically challenging to transport people and equipment to the continent. Antarctica is one of the least explored regions on Earth, and much of the continent remains uncharted. The extreme weather conditions and difficult terrain make it challenging to collect data, particularly in remote areas. Although this is the case, workers have long documented strange encounters that they've had while stationed here. According to one worker, they reported that many crew members aboard whale research ships have reported seeing massive creatures on the icy continent. Reports detail that when approaching Antarctica, crew members will report seeing large spider-like creatures walking across the snow and having colors that help them blend into the surroundings. As their vessels begin to approach Antarctica, they quickly realize that the large masses on top of the ice are not part of the landscape, but are real creatures that quickly move away as they approach. These creatures are described as being a few inches to several feet in length. Others have often reported that the creature was originally mistaken as being a rock, but as they ventured closer, they could see legs, a rounded body, eyes, and a mouth. Oddly enough, around the same time as these creatures were being reported, crew members aboard Japanese whale research ships stated that humanoid creatures were seen close to land. Later referred to as the Ningen by the Japanese crew, these creatures are believed to be some form of Antarctic humans that are impossible to understand. To this day, evidence is hard to come by, and it continues to be a mystery of the Japanese crews that experience these occurrences on a nearly daily basis. Conflicting theories surrounding the creatures have popped up in recent years. Some experts believe the Ningen to be an undiscovered species of stingray, whereas other researchers believe the creature to be a form of evolved humans that have grown in size to combat the Antarctic cold. Those on board the whale research ships have said the spider creatures are hard to identify, mainly because they blend in so well with the background, further noting that the majority of the time they get mistaken for things like rocks. As of right now, those who've worked in the region are sure that they encountered something mysterious, and state that because Antarctica is such a hard place to study, there could be various species unknown to science living throughout the region. Staying on the subject of mysterious creatures in Antarctica, one interesting story is that of organism 46b. Before information surrounding organism 46b can be discussed, the environmental context must be thoroughly identified. Reports of organism 46b and its habitation rests within that of Lake Vostok, located more than 700 feet beneath the glacial surface of the ice at its shallowest region, and roughly 2,600 feet at depth of its deepest region. It's at this depth that the ice from the Antarctic glaciers are under enough pressure to melt and form deep lakes. It's within one of these deep lakes, known as Lake Vostok, that the creature known as organism 46b resides within. A supposedly leaked document surrounding the first attempts made by Russian researchers back on the 5th of February in 2012, while drilling to the lake's surface, made reference to the creature known as organism 46b. The report itself was titled Organism 46b and detailed an increasingly bizarre story in which Russian researchers claimed to have encountered a massive colossal squid residing in the lake that could release toxins into the water, could squeeze itself down into small sizes, take on weird shapes, change its physical colors, and could cause a mild form of hypnotism if a person began to stare at the creature for too long. Here are quotes from the supposed letter written by a man named Dr. Anton Padalka. We encountered organism 46b on our first day. It disabled our radio, which we later learned to our alarm was intentional. It's also able to paralyze prey from a distance of up to 150 feet, by releasing its venom into the water. Tragically, my colleague and lifelong friend was taken out this way. He was treading water, wearing a blissful smile as the organism approached him. It was as if it had hypnotized him telepathically. It shaped itself into the form of a human diver. We thought it was one of my colleagues swimming towards us in scuba gear. By the time the closest scientist had realized what it had grabbed him and torn him to bits. End quote. Some variations of the legend claim that one of the tentacles to the creature had been chopped off, but that the severed tentacle later reanimated and strangled another member of the team. The legend ends claiming that there were few surviving members of the expedition and that Russian officials captured the creature in an attempt to cover up the event. Fact-checking the story leads to a number of strange dead ends that come about in areas of documented factual events that otherwise should have been explored. Here is the completed timeline of the factual events of the Lake Vostok drilling expedition. Back in January of 2011, scientists Valery Lukin and Sergei Bulat published a paper titled Vostok Subglacial Lake, Details of Russian Plans, Activities for Drilling and Sampling. Valery Lukin worked at the Russian Antarctic Expedition, Arctic and Antarctic Research Institute at St. Petersburg, Russia, and Sergei Bulat worked at the Petersburg Nuclear Physics Institute, Russian Academy of Sciences in Russia. The document detailed the first and only public plan for a Russian expedition into Lake Vostok. Here is a portion from the introduction of the paper surrounding the expedition. The Russian Federation has developed a national project involving the drilling and sampling of Vostok Subglacial Lake, East Antarctica. The objective is to explore this extreme icy environment using a variety of techniques to identify the forms and levels of life that exist there. End quote. During the time of the published paper, the Russian Federation had yet to receive support from the other nations of the world, as their borehole efforts were actively going against the Antarctic Treaty, with the United Kingdom and the United States petitioning the Russian Federation against borehole techniques due to the environmental impact of the sealed lake. Their opposition was due, in part, to the drilling techniques used by the Russian scientists, of which included the massive use of freon and kerosene to act as a lubricant for the drilling equipment, of which would immediately drain into the lake at the point of connection. Despite the Antarctic Treaty violation, the Russian Federation continued with their efforts. Within the published paper titled Vostok Subglacial Lake, Details of Russian Plans, Activities for Drilling and Sampling, the scientists detailed a new piece of technology that would allow the borehole to use a transportation module that could be sent down into the borehole via new mechanisms and enter into the lake. The diagram for the technology claims that the module device and the borehole would be only 123 millimeters in diameter and impossible to send a diver into. However, given the secrecy of the project and the designs used, such a technology could have been scaled up to send a research team into the borehole if made slightly larger. The technology also shows evidence of human-sized transportation modules, given that the module designs had a height and width that would scale to fit a human body in a cylindrical tube of a height 3 times the tube's width. By October of 2011, Valery Lukin, the co-author of the published paper, was at the Antarctic Research Station alongside Alexei Turkiev, of whom were both overseeing the drilling expedition. The expedition continued for several weeks, up until the end of December, before issues first arose amongst the expedition. The reason for why Valery Lukin first started his expedition in October of 2011 was due to October being the summer months for the Antarctic continent, keeping the location at its warmest for the expedition. These summer months only last from the beginning of October to the 6th of February. However, after the 6th, the expedition must be called off due to temperatures plummeting below 40 degrees Celsius. On the 28th of December, the team claimed that they had less than 5 meters left to drill before striking into the lake, and were confident they would meet their goal before the end of the Antarctic summer months. However, it was shortly after this last transmission that the team would then undergo a 6-day radio silence for reasons not entirely understood. This is an article that was published on the 3rd of February, 3 days before the reported breach confirmation of Lake Vostok. The world holds its breath, hoping for the best after 6 days of radio silence from Antarctica, where a team of Russian scientists is racing the clock and the oncoming winter to dig to an alien lake far beneath the ice. The team's last contact with colleagues in the unfrozen world was 6 long days ago, and scientists from around the globe are unsure of the fate of the mission and the scientists themselves. End quote. Given the last transmission, it was believed that the Russian team would have bored into Lake Vostok on the 29th of December. However, their claims of breach would come after a 9-day radio silence on the 6th of February, of which was the longest amount of time the expedition team could have waited before forcing the end of the expedition due to winter weather. This would have provided the team with more than 9 days to cover up any events that would have occurred shortly after the breach on the 29th of October. It's due to this that the sudden radio silence after the 28th of October provides a merit of truth to the claims of cover-up efforts, and over a week's span of time, dealing with organism 46b. Shortly after the end of the expedition, half of Valery Lukin's research team would end their careers in Antarctic expeditions and leave the research team without further information surrounding the members. The encounter with the organism 46b led to the reported deaths of several top-secret Russian researchers, and so many believe that this is why the document could have been leaked as a warning to other researchers in the area. Despite the far-fetched abilities of organism 46b, reports appear to match a number of known cases of squid and octopus entities in the real world. In fact, every single ability mentioned by the letters that organism 46b might possess appears to match many of the abilities found in deep-sea species of cephalopods, an environment that would be similar in light, pressure, and water quality to organism 46b. Here is a detailed writing surrounding the theoretical ability of telepathic traits of the creature and how the ability could be scientifically explained. Understanding organism 46b and its ability to perform telepathic ability is both difficult and nearly impossible, as the mechanisms for telepathy are still not entirely understood in the modern day. However, assumptions and data information surrounding numerous marine animals can be made as to what might be responsible for the telepathic abilities. It's important to note that there is evidence and scientific endeavors in the realm of neuroscience, and the ability to translate the neuron's near-random electrical impulse firings into readable information that can be displayed or understood. In fact, back in 1999, there was a research study by Dan Yang at the University of Berkeley, California, that successfully recreated what a cat observes in the physical world using pure data retrieved from visual neurons. The implications of this finding means that if someone could create a technology so sensitive and accurate in picking up electromagnetic fields or electrical stimuli, one could remotely detect these occurrences coming from the human brain and work to gather the data required to translate your thoughts and brain signals into readable information. If we take this theory of data retrieval from the brains of animals via sensing electrical impulses and changes in the electromagnetic field, then there is evidence of evolution granting this ability amongst life here on Earth. Referred to as electroreception, it's a sense that humans do not seem to possess that gives animals the ability to perceive natural electrical stimuli in other forms of life around them. Electroreception on Earth has only been seen to occur almost exclusively in aquatic life or amphibious animals that spend their time in salt water, since salt water is a much better natural conductor compared to surrounding air. In fact, this ability is so sensitive that young sharks can recognize the specific characteristics and traits of electrical stimuli amongst predators, and hide before the creature even comes within sight. Given the fact that organism 46b is expected to live its entire life in a completely dark underwater environment, it's possible that the species could have evolved a complex form of electroreception for its survival. Here is a detailed writing surrounding the theoretical ability of hypnotic traits within organism 46b and how the ability could be scientifically explained. Squids are one of the very few species in the world that can camouflage and change the pigments of their skin so rapidly that they can make a variety of colors. Additionally, the glass squid species is capable of using bioluminescence in a deep-sea environment to temporarily stun fish and seemingly hypnotize them to be consumed. Given the depth and the lack of light deep within the underground Lake Vostok, it's of a high probability that if large marine animals were to exist within the trapped lake, they would also possess evolutionary abilities to generate bioluminescence. Bioluminescence, tied with a squid's ability to alter the color of the pigments of their skin, could create seizure-inducing colors and shapes that could temporarily cause an individual to become hypnotized or undergo a seizure if looking directly at the creature. This could explain the hypnotic effects as reported in the leaked document surrounding the creature. Here is a detailed writing surrounding the theoretical ability of shape-shifting traits within organism 46b and how the ability could be scientifically explained. Given the lack of bones or large deposits of cartilage within an octopus, the species is capable of squeezing through small openings and shrinking their body size down to impossible sizes. In fact, a 600-pound octopus is capable of pushing its entire body through a hole the size of a quarter. As long as an opening is large enough to allow the creature to fit its beak through, it will travel through the opening with relative ease. It's for this reason that the claim of shape-shifting abilities of organism 46b are realistic to the species of which it seems to have evolved from. Additionally, a borehole the size of 123 millimeters would have been more than enough of a size to fit its body through if it were to make an attempt to reach the surface of the glacier. Here is a detailed writing surrounding the theoretical ability of toxic traits within organism 46b and how the ability could be scientifically explained. The use of toxins from organism 46b seem to stem from real-life examples of cephalopods using small amounts of venomous toxins in the modern day. The blue-ringed octopus is an octopus only roughly the size of a standard-issue golf ball and contains enough venom to cause the demise of 26 adult male humans if its venom were to be injected. The blue-ringed octopus also has a number of other strange abilities, such as the ability to use jet propulsion by funneling water to allow it to move far faster in the water compared to other marine species. It could be possible that organism 46b also possesses these abilities and is capable of ejecting venom similar to an ink sac to incapacitate species of larger size. This is if the size of organism 46b is to be believed. If the claims surrounding organism 46b are to be believed, the creature has the following abilities that have allowed it to take out several individuals within an incredibly short span of time. Shape-shifting, hypnosis, camouflage, colossal size, ability to shrink, telepathy, and large quantities of toxins. Given its danger and efforts needed to be contained by the Russian Federation, as claimed by the leaked document, this could very well mean that organism 46b is one of the most dangerous creatures naturally living on planet Earth. Its ability to be weaponized for future efforts also seems to be a very real possibility, given the claims of the leaked document and other rumors that have surfaced surrounding the creature. The mysterious incident above Tehran. The Tehran incident refers to a series of events that occurred on September 19, 1976, when a mysterious object was reportedly sighted over the city of Tehran, Iran. This mysterious incident is based on a chase that was carried out by two planes that belonged to the Iranian army. In this chase, the pilots of the Iranian army tried to take down the object using their weapons, but this proved useless. Interestingly, every time they tried to do this, their electrics would stop working. As they got closer to the object, they noticed more interference, and several parts of the aircraft started to shut down. The Imperial Air Force was informed of different reports and sightings of strange objects in the sky. This was alarming to all those who witnessed it, since it was a never-before-seen object that was in the shape of a sphere. This strange object was also seen firing out multiple lights, something that witnesses couldn't explain. After hundreds of calls from civilians, it was decided to send an F-4 Phantom for the purpose of investigating what was happening. This aircraft took off with the sole purpose of intercepting the unidentified object. Since the pilots managed to locate the object, they had orders to attack it. But strangely, when being around 50 kilometers away from the object, the Iranian craft began to present some failures, and this stopped the military from being able to communicate with each other. The pilots decided to return to the base, noticing that since they got away from the object, they recovered all the normal functions of the plane. As expected, a second Iranian aircraft took off to identify the unknown object. Unlike the first encounter, the mysterious object began to make its way towards the plane, almost as if inspecting it. The pilot said that the craft in question was very bright, and that as it got closer, the brightness of the object stopped them from getting a good look at it. Not only did this craft come close, but it was reported that it released a drone-like object. This observed the plane and then returned back to the original object. The pilots felt like they were going to be attacked, so they decided to fight back. They noticed that once again the weapons panel was completely inactive, which was alarming when they were in the sky with something they had never seen before, However, they received no attacks, and it seemed as if the craft was just interested in the plane. One of the smaller objects descended into the desert, and the Iranian plane was ordered to proceed. The next day, a search was conducted for evidence of the sighting, and whatever was found remains a secret. The Tehran incident is considered to be one of the most well-documented and credible sightings on record, and it continues to be the subject of much speculation and debate. The Stefan Mikalak encounter. Stefan Mikalak was a Canadian amateur prospector who had an encounter with a mysterious aircraft in May 1967, known as the Falcon Lake incident. According to Mikalak's account, while prospecting for quartz on the shores of Falcon Lake in Manitoba, Canada, he saw two cigar-shaped objects in the sky. One of the objects landed nearby, and he approached it out of curiosity. He claimed to have seen several panels on the craft and heard voices coming from inside. Mikalak reportedly attempted to touch the craft, and it suddenly emitted a blast of hot gas or vapor, which burned his shirt and caused him to fall backward. He was taken to a hospital with burns on his chest and stomach, which later turned into raised circular lesions. After the incident, Mikalak underwent significant media attention, medical examinations, and scientific investigations. While some believed his account to be genuine, others were skeptical and suggested that he had made up the story or hallucinated the encounter. Mikalak passed away on October 18, 1999, at the age of 83, reportedly never deviating from his original story of the Falcon Lake incident. The case remains one of the most famous mysterious encounters in Canadian history, and it continues to be the subject of debate and speculation among researchers and enthusiasts. The missing people of Oregon. Over 250,000 individuals are reported missing every year, with estimates of actual missing persons cases that are left unreported, pushing that total to more than an expected 300,000 cases annually. With that many reports, it's no wonder that a vast majority of these cases are left unsolved. The vanishing of Professor Daming Xu. On the 4th of November, back in 2007, one of the most difficult to explain disappearances and investigations would take place at the Cougar Reservoir located at the Three Sisters Wilderness, within the Willamette and Deschutes National Forests, found in the state of Oregon. Known as Dr. Daming Xu, a 63-year-old professor would suddenly go missing while taking a short-day hike through the region, leading to one of the most puzzling disappearances and partial recoveries ever recorded in the area. According to the official report, Dr. Daming and his wife Shixu came to the United States during the late 1980s when they emigrated from China. After several years of bouncing around the United States, the couple would eventually find their permanent home on the West Coast, choosing to reside within the small town of Eugene, located in Oregon. It would be here that Dr. Daming would apply for his lifelong job of teaching mathematical statistics at the University of Oregon. Given his background in mathematics, having received an advanced mathematics degree while growing up and studying in China, Dr. Daming would soon rise to the title of professorship and would hold the job for a little over 17 years. Similar to Dr. Daming, the professor's wife, Shixu, would also seek full-time employment and end up working at a large electronics company that specialized in the manufacturing of memory chips. Due to their full-time employment, the couple rarely spent time together and would usually get home at a late hour, nearly completely exhausted. Shixu would later tell investigators that a few months prior to Dr. Daming's disappearance, both she and her husband had been working full 12-hour shifts, and so were spending all of their free time either hiking together or taking short vacations to national parks. It would be at around this time that investigators would learn that Shixu and Daming were highly experienced outdoorsmen, with the couple regularly going for long wilderness hikes or short camping getaways whenever their days off were scheduled at the same time. One of their favorite places to visit would be the area of the Terwilliger Hot Springs, located near the Cougar Reservoir. According to Shixu, the couple had visited the area over a couple dozen times in the past, as Shixu suffered from a painful condition that she claimed would be relieved when she would take a bath in one of the many hot springs there that were claimed to have supernatural healing properties. Not only were investigators puzzled by the fact that Daming would disappear in an area he was more familiar with than any of the other hiking visitors, but they would also learn that due to his frequent hikes and love for the outdoors, Dr. Daming was incredibly fit and athletic. Although the professor was 63 years old, his family would describe him as incredibly healthy and physically fit. Not only did Daming not suffer from any known medical issues, but every morning and late afternoon, he would ride his bicycle to and from work for more than 5 miles a day. Due to this information, it seemed even more unlikely that any physical illnesses or problems concerning Daming's physical health could have led to his disappearance and inability to return home. On the day of Dr. Daming's disappearance, he and his wife would wake up at around 7 in the morning. Before Shixu left to start her 12-hour shift, Daming had told her that he had had the day off from work and was planning on going for a day hike near the Cougar Reservoir, where they would commonly travel together as a couple. In order to take the extra precautions always necessary when going on a day hike, Dr. Daming would tell his wife exactly where he planned on visiting and his route through the area. According to Shixu, Daming planned on taking the car 30 miles east of the small town of Eugene, traveling on Highway 126, where he would drive a mile south into the Cougar Reservoir. Daming preferred that area as it was often very remote and out of the way of the usual hikers who journeyed there, as it was located more than 50 miles north of the more commonly visited Crater Lake National Park, located in the middle of the Cascades National Forest. Daming would then tell his wife that he would be back home before she would get back from work, as he only planned on taking a short hike and returning back in the late afternoon. Just as was told, Daming would drive to the Forest Service Road NF19, a spot that travels south from the Cougar Reservoir, and would end at a small parking area where investigators would later find Daming's vehicle. It was there that Daming would prepare a small backpack with the necessary equipment for a day's hike, as well as collecting his hiking map that he would use to help him safely traverse the nearby forest. The map was taken from a book written by William Sullivan, titled Hikes in Northwest Oregon and Southwest Washington, which helped to outline the trails of the safest routes hiking through the national forest. The professor would take only the portion of the book he would need for his day hike and leave the rest of the book in his vehicle for investigators to later find and compare with later recovered materials. Although experts are uncertain of exactly when Daming left his vehicle, it's believed that he had started his hike sometime in the early afternoon between 9 to 10 in the morning. It would be shortly after this time that 2 hikers would claim to have met Professor Daming while on the summit of Olali Mountain, roughly 7 miles from where Daming had parked his vehicle. Deciding to take a rest on the summit, the 2 hikers would converse with Daming for almost 15 minutes, where they would take the time to talk about their hiking trails. Daming would share with the 2 hikers that he planned on continuing in the direction of the French Peat Creek before taking the return journey back to his vehicle. Already, the group was at the highest elevation of the entire journey, standing on the 5,500-foot peak that overlooked the area below, and so they were aware they would have to conserve the energy to make the trek back up the mountain to where the parking area was at, which was stationed at around the 2,200-foot elevation mark. After resting for only a few minutes, Daming decided to carry on down the mountain towards the French Peat Creek, while the 2 other hikers rested for a few more minutes before taking off in the same direction as the professor. Oddly enough, even though the summit overlooked the entire area, when the 2 hikers ended their rest and started heading down the mountain in the direction of the French Peat Creek, they failed to see any sign of the professor on their travels. However, rather than being concerned, the couple remarked that the professor appeared to have been in high spirits, and so assumed that he must have traveled much further up the trail than they had anticipated. It would not be until around 7:15 in the evening that Shixu would return home to find that her husband had not yet returned from his trip, and his car was missing. Worried that something bad had happened, Shixu claimed that she would call her husband's cell phone several times, but would not receive any answer. Little did she know, Professor Daming had left his cell phone behind in his vehicle shortly before his hike, which investigators would not find until the following day. After several failed attempts at reaching her husband, Shixu started to grow extremely nervous and then called their daughter, who lived in Portland, about what she should do. Oddly enough, it would be at around this point in the story that the local news media would report 2 separate stories. According to a local newspaper, it's claimed that shortly after the call with her daughter, Shixu would contact the local Eugene Police Department to report her husband as missing. However, another news source would claim that Shixu would wait until the next morning to contact the authorities and Park Service to report her husband missing. It's unclear which source is the more accurate one, but it's believed that by the 5th of November of 2007, the authorities were on the lookout for Professor Daming, who was believed to have been missing. After Shiksu provided police officers with his last known location, Daming's vehicle would soon be found parked on the Forest Service Road 19, in the small parking area a mile south of the Cougar Reservoir. After searching Daming's vehicle, the police would find several interesting pieces of equipment, including Daming's leather coat, a few small snack items, and the rest of the map book that had been left behind. Given the fact that it was believed he had been missing through the night, the lack of a jacket or snack items raised a cause for concern that the 63-year-old professor could be in poor health, having been missing for so long. However, Daming's daughter would immediately travel to the small town of Eugene from Portland, Oregon, and provide the local press with the story of her father's disappearance to help kickstart search and rescue procedures. It would be during these contacts with the press that his daughter would tell reports about her father's incredible physical condition, his vast experience with hiking in the area, and that she believed that if he had not been injured, then he should survive for several days, if not a week, out near the Cougar Reservoir. Over the next few days, in conjunction with the Eugene Police Department, the Lane County Sheriff's Department would be the primary local law enforcement agency helping to organize and lead the search and rescue operations in regards to Professor Daming's recovery. The official search radius for Professor Daming, according to the Lane County Sheriff's Department, would ultimately encompass almost the entirety of Willamette National Forest, located within the Three Sisters Wilderness, where Daming was believed to have been since his disappearance. Unfortunately for the family, the Willamette National Forest resides in an extremely rugged region with steep cliffs and one of the thickest woodlands of the entire state, making any efforts of finding Daming incredibly difficult. Unlike many of the other surrounding forests, the Willamette National Forest has never been logged in the history of its formation, leading to many of the hiking trails having been thin, naturally carved-out pathways from repeated use, amongst dense, almost untraversable forest, rather than actually planned and formed open safer pathways for inexperienced hikers. In less than 24 hours following the professor's disappearance, the Lane County Sheriff's Department would gather search and rescue volunteers from the United States Forest Service, the Eugene Police Department, the Benton County Sheriff's Search and Rescue, the Deschutes County Sheriff's Search and Rescue, 2 manned helicopters from the state's National Guard, members of the Civil Air Patrol, several dozen local hikers and experienced outdoorsmen, the Smith County Search and Rescue Team, and several volunteer equestrian riders. Before long, teams of search and rescue, coupled with support from low-flying aircraft and state-of-the-art infrared, were looking for Daming non-stop for the next few days. Originally, search and rescue volunteers were confident that Daming would be found alive and well, as the region had plenty of naturally flowing clear water creeks and rivers that could have been used by Daming to help stay hydrated, as well as a lot of edible dense foliage and berries that were at the right time of the year to be harvested. Regardless of these good conditions, the volunteers also worried that if Daming had been injured, it may take too long for the teams to find him before hypothermia and dehydration would set in, as their search radius included more than 100 square miles of the densest wilderness of Oregon. For over a week, the entire national forest was closed from outside hikers in order to not destroy any evidence of Daming's location. After the first day of searching, a team of bloodhounds were brought to the site to where Daming had last been seen, on the summit of Mount Olali, to help find a more direct trail. Oddly enough, the dogs could pick up the scent of Daming while on the summit, but would soon lose it when descending the mountain in the direction of the French Peat Creek, as if Daming had suddenly vanished from the trail. After choosing to focus more on the area surrounding the summit, the weather would suddenly take a turn for the worse. Over the course of only a few minutes, a heavy fog would descend onto the summit that would bring a dense snow with heavy winds at the higher elevations and a thick hail rain at the lower elevations. The unexplainable fog made it impossible and incredibly unsafe for any of the aerial support to continue flying around the mountains, forcing any of the aircraft involved in the search to ground until the weather could clear. The strong winds and heavy rainfall would also make it incredibly difficult for the bloodhound teams to pick up a scent of any kind. Due to the heavy rainfall, as the days dragged on, the trails turned into little more than muddy pathways, hampering search efforts even further. It would not be until the 7th of November, on a Tuesday, that search and rescue volunteers would get any sign of Daming. During the late afternoon, the bloodhound teams were able to pick up a trail that followed downhill and were believed to have shown evidence of tracks belonging to Daming, as a partial footprint was believed to have matched his shoe. The teams would follow this strange forming trail for almost 12 hours, following them until around 3 in the morning on Wednesday. Unfortunately for the teams, the tracks would mysteriously vanish in an area referred to as Bear Flats, where large predatory animal populations were known to freely roam. Any sign of the professor would not be uncovered for another 10 hours, when 2 searchers were deep in the area of the French Peat Creek drainage and noticed a brightly coloured object in the distance. As the 2 searchers closely approached the drainage area, where the creek naturally deposited any loose material that falls into it, the search and rescue volunteers were shocked to find that the object was the remaining half of the brightly coloured trail guidebook that Professor Daming had been carrying with him during his hike. Believing the trial guidebook to have been the best clue as to his potential location, the teams would follow the French Peat Creek and search along a 5-mile radius from the creek on both sides in the hopes of coming across Professor Daming. Despite their renewed efforts and hopeful clues, after a week of searching, no other sign or clue of Professor Daming was uncovered. Many of the search and rescue volunteers would complain that even if Professor Daming had been near the creek, in many areas following the waterway, the surrounding vegetation was extremely thick and made it impossible for volunteers to make an extensive, accurate search of the region. After a total of 9 days of intense searching, with the help of aerial craft, canine and equestrian teams, and more than 2,000 man-hours, the Lane County Sheriff Department would end up providing a press conference in which they would announce that all departments were terminating the search for Professor Daming, as no further evidence or signs of his whereabouts were known, and he was no longer believed to have still been alive. Even after searchers continued in an unofficial search, dragging lines through creeks and gullies, and checking any roads or mountainsides, nothing more had ever turned up. Experts handling the case would consider the vanishing of Professor Daming to be one of the most mysterious reported missing persons cases ever encountered, given the fact that the professor was an experienced hiker who had frequented the area more than several dozen times in the past, and had only made plans to take a short, safe hike and return to his vehicle less than a couple miles away. Even more peculiar, Daming was in incredible shape and did not suffer from any known medical issues. When Daming encountered the hiking couple towards the end of his hike, the couple also remarked that the professor seemed to have been in good spirits and did not appear to be in any form of trouble, as he had on a backpack with basic supplies and a trail guidebook to help him find his way back with ease while following a simple hiking trail. The number of people who go missing each year can vary depending on the country, region, or circumstances. However, according to the latest data from the International Commission on Missing Persons, an estimated 600,000 people are reported missing every year in the United States alone, which translates to around 1,600 people per day. Globally, the numbers are even higher, with the International Criminal Police Organization estimating that at least 8 million people are reported missing each year worldwide. It's worth noting that not all missing person cases are reported, so the actual number of missing people may be even higher. So, what do you make of these unsolved mysteries? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comment section below and help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.